Okay, let's see if it's grab this link. Here's the link, Farouk. Hopefully that'll get you there.
Yes.
Okay, good. Right. Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started and start recording now. So, thank you guys for coming. Sorry we had to cancel this last week, but we were right in the middle of a storm. And so this will be recorded. To those of you who are watching, you'll get a copy of this as well as a summary. And I created a little audio. So you'll get a separate audio that I did that may have a few more details or may be a little different, but you'll get that. That's also in SoundWise. And you can find that on our podcast. Farouk, when you get a chance, could you also just grab the link for our virtual speech masters? You want to make sure that we post that up here as well. So I'm going to try to squeeze most of this in within 45 minutes or so, maybe even 30 minutes. And then we'll leave a pretty good amount of time for questions. Some questions, if it's relevant to what I'm talking about in that moment, I can go ahead and probably answer those before the end. But if you do have questions, be sure to just go ahead and type them into the chat box. And that way I can scroll back, or Farouk can scroll back, and we can look at them when we get to the Q&A portion. So I've got a lot of information, but I don't want to take this session up with putting all that information out. So more than likely, I'm going to do a little series on this where you'll get this information in more detail. But what we're talking about today is why and what to do when everything goes out the window. And I've heard this from many clients over the years, uh, that when you get in certain speaking situations, especially, of course, the higher pressure ones, everything that you learn, or a lot of what you've learned and practice, seems to go where? Out the window. That's the exact expression that people use, just goes out the window. There's been lots and lots and lots of studies done, and some very good books out there. One is called Choke. All right. So you can check that out. It's called Choke. That book has been out for a while. Another one is Performing Under Pressure. I believe that one came out after Choke. And all those books talk about what happens when you are doing anything. You could be a performer, you could be an artist, sports, musician, speaker, and you're put under pressure. And then everything that you know already, and even that you might be an expert in, seems to go out the window. So today, we're going to answer three basic questions. Why does it happen? Right? Why does it happen? And how can you prepare so that you can remain fluent and smooth in high pressure speaking situations? And then what do you do if and when you do freeze up? How can you quickly and smoothly recover? Right? So we're going to talk about why this happens, how to prepare so that it doesn't happen, or you decrease the possibility of it happening. And then what do you do if and when it does happen? Because it's probably going to happen to all of us at some point or another. Then it just depends on how you handle it. So let's first talk about why this happens. Why do things go out the window when you're under pressure? Well, there's something called the sympathetic nervous system. And when we edit this video, you'll also see some overlays, but I'm just going to write some of this down. Sympathetic nervous system. So Farouk is actually in training now. He's in Germany doing his master's degree in neuroscience. So he's going to be able to bring a lot of this information to us, and we'll be continuously improving our system um, in, in, in large part because of the knowledge and the education that he's going to be gaining in Germany. So we're very happy about that. The sympathetic nervous system is a part of the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is that part of our systems, if you will, of our nervous system that controls those functions that are unconscious, right? That need to happen automatically. That's why it's called the autonomic nervous system. Okay. So the autonomic nervous system, in part, is made up by the sympathetic, parasympathetic. We're going to talk about just those two. And the sympathetic, uh, funny enough, has to do with your stress response, your fight or flight response. Now, this is important that you understand some of the science behind it. And you've heard this before, probably in reading or other workshops and so forth. It's important just to understand basics of how this works because it's going to help us when we talk about how to prevent it from happening and then how to deal with it when it does happen. So that's why we're going through the science of this. And we'll also ask everyone to make sure that your audios are muted for now and your videos are muted. If you have questions, then we'll ask you to go ahead and unmute all of that stuff. Okay, so the sympathetic nervous system, believe it or not, it kind of activates our fight or flight or stress response. Who can tell me what you think we mean by fight or flight or stress response? Just go ahead and type that into the chat box and we'll take a look at it. But I'm going to start to explain it now. So type that into the chat box. What's your definition? What do you think the fight or flight or stress response is? So I'll start to talk about it now. The fight or flight or stress response has to do with when your brain perceives danger. Yes, someone says getting ready for action, reaction, movement. Exactly. So when you and I perceive danger, and obviously many, many years ago, it was physical danger that we would perceive, that we would see an animal, the tribe's person, right? Some kind of physical danger. Then different parts of our brain would immediately jump into action and take over. Okay. Jump into action and take over. So, and this is because our brain prioritizes survival, right? It prioritizes survival over critical thinking. And you'll know what I mean when I talk about that in just a moment. So, when your brain prioritizes survival over critical thinking, then what happens is something called your amygdala, uh, your amygdala kicks in and begins to manage parts of your brain, right? Manage parts of your brain. It sends actually signals, it sends messages to parts of your brain and then your body that manage a fight or flight response, which affects your breathing. So often your breathing gets more shallow. It redirects oxygen, some oxygen, away from parts of your brain that have to do with critical thinking, analyzing, making decisions, your prefrontal cortex. Okay. So the amygdala then sends out signals to different parts of your brain. It starts pulling blood flow from your prefrontal cortex, pulling some oxygen. It shortens your breathing, so your breathing gets more shallow. Sometimes you start to sweat more, right? Your muscles start to tense up, okay, which includes your speech muscles. Things just start to tense up. And you your digestive system actually begins to kind of shut down because your body, your brain needs to redirect blood away from your digestive system, away from your prefrontal cortex to those parts of your body that need to get into action, that needs to run, that needs to fight, right? Or just needs to freeze. So then, as you can imagine, in today's time, yeah, there are some situations where we need to fight or flight or freeze. But often, if not most of the time, these situations are not life threatening. So, for example, you may perceive an upcoming speaking event or an upcoming speaking experience as something that is threatening you, right? Something that is threatening you. And so, if you perceive the speaking situation as a threat, if your brain perceives it as a threat, then what do you think happens? Well, automatically, your body begins to go into the stress response, the fight or flight response. So this is even before it happens. You start to think about it. Now, we'll get into some of the psychological reasons. Right now, we're talking mostly about the physiological reasons, but you start to go into that response. And once you're in the speaking situation, then if you go into the fight or flight or stress response, then things that I just talked about begin to happen. And so you're not able to speak smoothly. And this can happen to people who never stuttered, right? But in those speaking situations, they can begin to stutter. They can begin to forget. That is, they uh, get cloudy, right? They get cloudy. So they start to forget what they wanted to say, what they prepared. Their breathing gets shallow, so they don't have enough air. They start to sweat. They get tense. If they do stutter, even if they don't, but if they do stutter, then they'll probably start to block and stutter and so forth. All right. So all of these things are happening because your body is now shifted into defense mode, right? It wants to defend you from a threat. Now, there are some additional factors that play into why your speech skills go out the window. So, in addition to the sympathetic nervous system, all those things that happen, they can begin to happen when you think about a situation, as well as when you're in the situation. There's some additional factors that play into this. One has to do with previous experiences. Okay, so previous experiences. That's one. There's three that we'll talk about. Previous experiences. So if you've had previous experiences, right, that has impacted you negatively, for example, you had a presentation or you had a phone call or you had a conversation or you had an interview and you weren't able to say what you wanted to say. You stuttered or you forgot what you wanted to say or you froze up. Then that experience is imprinted very strongly in our memory. And one reason is because it is attached to emotions. So whenever there's something that is attached to and or emotions are attached to it, if there's something like an experience and emotions are attached to it, we will remember it longer, right? It can impact us in a worse way. Now, there are also other senses that can trigger memories, like smell. Have you ever smelled something like, oh, and it brought back a memory? Or you heard some music, or you tasted something, or you felt something, right? Or you just were someplace like at a beach and it brought up old memories. Well, the same thing can happen and does happen when there's emotion. So when there are feelings attached to an experience like embarrassment, fear, or anger, you are more likely to remember that than you would if there were no emotions attached to it at all. It's just something that happened. You're more likely to forget it. If there's strong emotions, you're more likely to remember it. So if you had an experience where you weren't able to say what you wanted to say, well, guess what's going to happen? If you felt embarrassed, if you felt nervous, felt anxious, felt depressed, then you're going to remember that. So previous experience is a huge one. Also, previous experiences because your brain uses those to predict how you might perform in the future. So it goes back and it says, have we ever been in this kind of situation before? Yes, we were in this kind of a situation before. Well, what happened How did we react? How did we respond? How did we perform? Oh, well, this is what happened. Oh, well, then probably this is what's going to happen again. Okay. So then when that happens, you're more likely to perform in that same way or have that same kind of experience. Doesn't mean you have to. And we'll talk about how you can short circuit that, but that's what's more likely to happen. And the more it happens, the more it's kind of reinforcing that it's going to happen again in the future. And the other one is environment. And then this last one, talk about this now. Environmental factors can affect this also. So what am I talking about when I say environmental factors? What are some of the environmental factors? Well, the people who are around you, all of you know that there are times when there are certain people, for example, people in authority. We've done quite a bit of stuff on this. We have some videos on how to perform well under pressure around people in authority. But so you're around people in authority. And this can cause all of your speaking skills to go out the window. If you're around certain personality types, certain people are aggressive, certain people can irritate you, or cause you to get angry, cause you to feel angry, or put you on the defense, right? You could be in a meeting. There's always some people in there who want to put you on the defense, right? So those kinds of people can also cause your speaking skills to go out the window. If there are a certain number of people, I've talked to people where if there are 3 people, 5 people, 7 people, they're fine. It's the 10 and 15 or 20, skills go out the window. If you're on stage, if you're standing, if you're sitting, if people can see your video, if you're on the phone, if you have to read, right? All of these are environmental factors that can affect the potential, right? That can increase the likelihood of your speaking skills going out the window. And the third one has to do with, and this just makes sense, right? Uh, thought patterns. Create that. Thought patterns, old thought patterns, but thought patterns and habits. So if you have thoughts about specific speaking situations that are negative, that are destructive, not helpful, this can cause your speaking skills to go out the window. So if you think, I'm not going to be able to perform well, or what's going to happen if I don't sound intelligent in front of this group of people, will this affect my job, my income, my career, my reputation, my relationships? So you start thinking about these things. And because you think about it in that way, it starts to bring up the stress response. And then you simply don't perform as well as you could. So old thought patterns about speaking situations and or about your ability to perform well, I don't think I'll be able to do that because I haven't done it in the past, or I'm just not prepared, or I'm just not good at this. So about your ability, about the situation itself, your thought patterns, but then about how people might perceive you or respond, kind of the fear of judgment, if you will, and the fear of embarrassment, the fear of failing, all those things. So if you're thinking about what other people are thinking about you, and especially if you're thinking that they're thinking something negative, and if you're hoping, right, you're hoping that something doesn't happen. So this is a thought pattern. I hope I don't get stuck. Hope I don't stutter. I don't block, especially on these words. Or I hope I sound intelligent. I hope I use the correct words. I hope I don't forget. I hope I don't, right? So you start thinking of what you don't want to happen. It causes a stress response, right? The fight or flight. And the exact thing that you don't want to happen starts to happen. Okay. Again, because of how the sympathetic nervous system works out in this whole thing that we're talking about. So there's the physiological aspect of the sympathetic nervous system, how that kicks in. Your amygdala kicks in and says, ooh, okay, we're going to redirect energy and resources away from your thinking brain, which can calm you down, in which you can direct your self talk and your affirmations. And there's some other things that we'll talk about right? Directs it away. You're breathing and all of that to kind of hijacks that. Then you can understand why this happens. In addition, we talked about previous experiences. We talked about your environment, and we talked about old thinking patterns and habits. Now, let's go right into then the next major question here, which is how? How what? How can you prepare so that you decrease the likelihood of this happening? Well, something that we call priming, priming the brain, priming the brain for lots of different things. But in this case, we're talking about smooth speech, priming the brain for smooth speech. Many years ago, when I was younger, in my grandparents' house in Maryland, they used to have those old pumps outside. And in order to get water out of the pump, most of the time, especially first thing of the day, we had to do what? We had to prime the pump with water. So you always had to make sure that you left a bucket of water. If not, you were in trouble. You had to go someplace and get some water. So you always had to have water someplace that you could pour it in and start pump to prime the pump so that you could get water out, right? So you get that water flowing. This is the same thing with our brains. You want to prime your brain with the following techniques that I'm going to share with you. Most of these you've heard before, but we need to reinforce this. And I want you to see it in this context, right? 'Cause you've heard these things before, but put it in this context and understand that this stuff works. Stuff is very, very well researched. The reason I'm repeating this, I'll repeat it again, is I don't want you just to think it's just coming from me or just something that I made up. There's a lot of data, a lot of research out there that you can do for yourself, and you'll see, oh, wow, okay, these things actually do work. Yes, I've heard them before, but maybe I haven't actually tried to implement them. But if you do implement, in fact, one of my clients is here. She just got started doing some of the things that we're going to talk about. And she just said, I'm starting to already just feel more relaxed on a daily basis. And many clients said the same thing. We're going to talk about how to prime the pump and to now activate this other system that's called the parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system. All right. Now, what's the para? I'm sure you can see that, but yeah, there you go. Parasympathetic nervous system. What is that? Well, that's the one that kind of counters. That's the rest and digest. They call it rest and digest. This is where you start to calm down, where you start to relax. Your body then starts to redirect resources to your digestive system, to your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, right? Just to rest and relax, rest and digest. Now, this is important because if you know how to continuously on a daily basis activate, right, and prime your parasympathetic nervous system, you'll be more prepared and you will handle high pressure speaking situations better. All right. So we're going to talk about a handful of ways that you can do this. One you're very familiar with. Deep breathing. Deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It slows the heart rate down. It helps the body and mind relax. It allows you to think more clearly. It allows the prefrontal cortex to send commands. You're okay. You can handle this. Just relax. Slow down. Pause. You don't have to rush, right? You can start to think that. You can start to recall information just by doing deep breathing. I've done this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. Told you stories about times where my heart was pounding because I was about to go up on stage. This is after I had been teaching, preaching, speaking. I loved doing it, but I still felt that nervous, that excitement, right? That fight or flight. So what did I do? Immediately, I started doing deep breathing. And it slowed my heart rate down, but not completely. My heart was still pounding, but it did help to slow it down. Okay. So that's one thing that you can do, deep breathing before, right? So on a daily basis, you should be doing some kind of deep breathing exercise. We use the 777. You can use the 444 or any combination thereof, the 547, whatever. Doesn't really matter that much. Just do some breathing exercises where you inhale through the nose. Commercial break. I want you guys to take a look at our PI series. Pause, inhale, exhale, slow down. All right. Back to the content where you inhale through the nose, you hold it for a certain count. We say 7, right? You inhale at a count of 7, then you hold for a count of 7, then you exhale through the mouth for a count of 7. And what this does is this relaxes you, right? It activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So now you're priming that system to just be more relaxed, to be more activated throughout the day, as opposed to being stressed, not breathing a lot, just going through reacting constantly, being anxious and nervous constantly. You start to activate your parasympathetic nervous system just by doing deep breathing throughout the day. You'll find that you stay more relaxed. So you're priming your system now. All right, what's the next one? Believe it or not, intentional pausing, pausing more. So this is why we tell people that um, not just when you have to speak in front of people or when you have to do some kind of a big presentation or a meeting or something like that. But when you're speaking to friends and family, learn to pause more, slow everything down. Here's what happens when you pause. When you pause, you give your brain time to think, right? To process information. We actually did a whole webinar on eyes, really. But pausing gives your brain time to think, to relax. It also gives you time to breathe, right? You breathe in that pause. You're speaking and you take, I've been doing it this whole time. I have taken in a certain amount of breath that I have in here, right, on reserve, and I'm speaking. And whenever I feel like I need it, I take a breath in the pause. Also, pausing helps you to be able to think more clearly. And I've had people tell me this, wow, when I'm speaking, as I'm pausing a bit more, not pausing to the degree where your speech gets choppy, pausing after every word, but I'm pausing more. And so now I'm able to think more clearly. I'm able to speak and able to articulate my thoughts more clearly and concisely because they're pausing. And I have that space, cognitive breathing space in the pause. I have that space to take in more breath, have that space to think more. I have that space to self talk. When you pause in that moment, doesn't matter if you're under pressure, you're in the middle of a conversation, you're in the middle of speaking, but when you pause, like I just did there, you have that second or so to give yourself some self talk. Say, slow down, relax, right? Just write just that quickly, you can do it. So you have that cognitive breathing space. Pausing is extremely important. So something that you absolutely must start to do more. Breathe more, not just 777 breathing, yes, but also breathe more frequently, I say, and more fully while you are speaking. Everyday speaking, no to low pressure. You're priming your brain for high pressure speaking situations. So you're going to breathe more, you're going to pause more, and you're also going to do a couple of other things. One is visualization. What's visualization? Simply you're thinking about, you're imagining, right? You're picturing something happening the way that you want to. We also have something called verbalization, which you'll hear in the program. When you take the program, you'll hear that. So you got visualization, where you picture it. You can do this in less than a minute, 30 seconds. You can do it in a couple of seconds. Picture something going the way you want, as opposed to picturing something going the way you don't want. That is when you negatively anticipate or worry, or when you ruminate, when you go back and you start visualizing something that happened in the past. Okay. So if you do those things, what you're doing is reinforcing that behavior. You're telling your brain, this is what I want to focus on. This is what I want to happen. The more you picture it. So when you visualize something constructive, something happening the way you want, you're telling your brain, this is what I want to happen, as opposed to visualizing something negative. Okay. So visualizing affirmations, doing affirmations throughout the day um, that are relevant to an area that you want to improve. I always speak slowly. People love to listen to me. I'm in absolute control over my speech. I love to speak. I'm an amazing speaker. I'm an excellent speaker. I always feel calm. I always pause when I speak, right? All those things. So you can affirm, you do affirmations throughout the day, but especially when you're in a relaxed state, it allows those affirmations to sink in. All right. So we got visualization, affirmations, right, throughout the day. And then something called the law of control, which you've probably heard us talk about. The law of control. And this one, I really want you to check this out. Right? The law of control. Okay. So I want you to check this out. The law of control basically says that the more in control you feel you are of something, of your life, your relationships, your speech, the more confident you feel, the more calmer you feel, the more comfortable you feel, right? When you have options because you're in control, then you're going to feel more confident. Now, you guys know that this is true because when you don't feel like you have control over your speech, like I might block, I might stutter, I might not be able to say my name or introduce myself, or whatever the situation may be. You may not stutter, just maybe I'm unable to articulate my thoughts in certain speaking situations the way that I would like, the way that I should at my level. Then you feel like you're not in control because it just happens automatically, right? So when you feel out of control, you don't feel as confident. And when you don't feel as confident, you don't perform as well. Now, how can you reverse this? Well, what you want to do is do something here that we call create and or initiate, right? Create, initiate, and or facilitate. So you want to create, initiate, facilitate. What are you talking about, Michael? What are you talking about? So here's what we're talking about. When you create situations, you're being proactive. You're going to feel more in control because you created the situation. When you initiate a situation, for example, I'll give you some specific examples here. Someone, you go into a room and you know that you have to eventually introduce yourself, right? So let's say you didn't create that situation, but what you can do is initiate conversation, you can initiate introductions. You can go up to people and say, hey, it's nice to meet you. Is first time here, or how long have you been working here? Or hi, it's nice to meet you. My name is Michael. What's your name? Right? You've initiated automatically, you're going to feel more in control, and therefore you're going to feel more confident. What's another example? When you facilitate, and in this, I kind of mean this literally, but when you teach or train, right? When you teach or train, you feel more in control. It's like when you're speaking with a child, generally speaking, you're probably going to speak better, you're going to feel more confident. So when you're in a position of authority, right, and you are teaching, you're facilitating, you tend to feel more confident. I did all these things. Let's go back to create. When you create a situation to speak or teach or initiate or whatever, you're going to feel more confident. Here's what I used to do as I started to study speech and so forth many, many years ago, back in my 20s. I literally would prepare and I would go out and contact colleges, universities, and say, hey, I have a program or have a workshop on goal setting and time management. I'd love to come in and do it. It's about 60 minutes or 90 minutes. And some would say no, but a lot would say yes. So I would go in and it'd be a whole auditorium full of people and I had practice, practice, practice. This was back when I was still basically stuttering, but I was making a transformation of it. So I created, literally created a program based on Brian Tracy's stuff. And I created a situation. Hey, can I come in and do this? And then I did some initiation, obviously, right? But then I facilitated. So by doing those things, I felt more confident. And as I did it, and I did it well, what did that do? It created positive, successful memories for my brain to go back and say, oh, you can do this without any problems at all. So I hope that that makes sense. Law of control is very important. So you do things where you feel more in control whenever you can. There's some things that maybe you can't control in the way that you'd like, but you always have control over what you say, how you say it, and when you say it. So try to activate and use this law of control as much as possible. Some people feel like if someone asks me a question, I have to respond right now, or I have to respond with one word. No, you don't. Right. There's very few situations where you have to do something exact way. There's always some leeway. I use the example of in the military, standing in front of my platoon. There's not a whole bunch I can say, but platoon, attention, or attention. You can't really say, well, okay, guys, so get ready to call you to attention. Can't do that, right? You got to say one or two words. But I figured out a way to kind of add a little sound to my voice to get that out. So you always, always, even if you can only say one word or two words, you can always do something. And generally speaking, it's not going to be like that. I've worked with police officers, state troopers, first responders. There's always something else you can say or do to get those first few words out to prime the pump, right? Prime the pump to get the flow going. Once you have the flow going, you don't have to keep priming the pump. Just go pump water whenever you want. This is very important. It's the law of control. All right. So essentially, these are things that you do to kind of build resilience. Build resilience. Now, there's one more thing I'm going to share with you. And it's kind of related to the law of control. But you have to get out and expose yourself. Right? You have to get out and experience higher and higher pressure speaking situations so that you desensitize yourself. Because if you hide and you avoid, then you're probably always going to have challenges and issues in those kinds of speaking situations. Okay. So you really, really need to be able to get out there and expose yourself to them. And if you use this law of control, you can create, initiate, facilitate speaking situations, even though they're high pressure, but where you feel more in control. Now, let's talk about what to do if you freeze up in the middle. What do you do if? So then we'll leave some time for questions. So be sure that you're writing your questions down and or you're typing them in the chat box. Okay. So what do you do if you freeze up? Well, we're going to repeat some of the other things. Why? Because we're talking about now activating your parasympathetic nervous system. You have to activate that system so you can lower your heart rate, so you can get those resources, blood and air, redirected to your prefrontal cortex so that you can begin to tell your amygdala to calm down, right? And you can begin to uh, activate and manage something called Broca's area, which in large part manages our speech, right? So that the things that you've automated, just learning to speak smoothly, which are kind of seated in your basal ganglia, right? Which kind of automates things so that that can be activated and manage smooth speech like you've taught it to do, right? So you have to be able to redirect those resources back to your prefrontal cortex. I'm gonna give you like three or four things to do here. One, both of these we've talked about, but believe it or not, you can do this and you must do this in the situation. So if you freeze up, pause and breathe. Pause and breathe. Right in the middle, because if you don't, you're going to keep crashing and burning. Just everything's just going to keep going down. So you have to interrupt that pattern, whatever's happening. You're in that stress response. It's happening to you right then. You're getting stuff, you can't get stuff out, whatever. You have to interrupt that pattern, interrupt that flow. So you pause, you take a breath, you pause, you cough, you act like you're thinking, like you want to think of a different way. Say, take a breath. So you pause and you take a breath, right? And this calms the amygdala and it allows the prefrontal cortex to regain control. Okay. And where you can begin to give commands to the rest of your body. So pause and breathe, number one. Number two, reframe the moment. So you can say things like, I'm in control. I speak calmly and confidently. Um, you can say things like that and lots and lots of other affirmations. You can do self talk. You're okay. Just take your time. Just relax. You don't have to rush. You can say things like that in the pause. Right? While it's happening, you can do that. And you can also do something that we've talked about, where you can shift the focus away from yourself to Vic and Rick. This mental framework and mental tool is very important. The V stands for value, the R stands for relevancy, the I stands for impact, the C stands for clarity. If you have this in your brain, at the same time you're thinking about the content, kind of what you want to say, but you're thinking about it in terms of, is it valuable? Is it relevant? How do I want to say it so that people are getting it, they're paying attention to it? How do I want to say it so that it's clear, both stylistically, I'm enunciating, I'm articulating, I'm not speaking too fast, right? Excuse me. So you do this, and if you're thinking about that, you've then shifted your focus away from all those negative thoughts. And now you're thinking more positively, more constructively. So reframe the moment through affirmations, self-talk, and Vic and Rick. And trust me, you can do this in the moment, but this is why you have to prime, right? You have to prepare yourself to do it so that when you're in high pressure, you know what to do and you can do it. So you pause and breathe, reframe the moment, start slow, and focus on the message. Focus on Vic and Rick. So starting slow. I can't tell you how many people I've said it when you start speaking, for the most part, especially if you feel anxious. Interviews, presentations, conversations, introducing yourself, whatever it is, start slow or start super slow. In some cases, start super duper slow. When you do that and you breathe in between, so you start slow, you pause more, you breathe more, you are tapping into, you're activating the parasympathetic nervous system in the moment, in the moment. And so now your heart rate is starting to slow down. You're forcing yourself to breathe deeper, breathe more, getting more oxygen into your body. Also, you move your body, use your hands. If you're sitting, use your hands, use your face, right? We talk about all those things in proactive speaking. Use your body. So now you're expending a bit more energy. You're in more control of your body, how you're using your mouth and your lips and your face, as opposed to doing things that you feel like is kind of involuntary, but now you're voluntarily doing certain things with your body. So you feel more in control. You're starting slowly and you're getting yourself into a flow, into a rhythm, right? You're getting yourself into that flow. Now, if you slow your pace down, so you start super slow or slow, and you go slow the entire time, slower than what you feel comfortable, you will find that you're able to think more clearly, that your speaking skills and your content doesn't go out the window. You actually can retain it. You can say the things that you want to say if you start slower and you breathe more, if you reframe the moment by using affirmations and self-talk and thinking about Vic and Rick. Value, is this valuable? Is this relevant? Am I holding their attention? Is this clear? You're pausing and you're breathing more. So these are some things to do in the moment, right? Then we talked about ways to build resilience. So how to prepare yourself. One of the things we said is to get out and to use that law of control, create, initiate, and facilitate situations to put yourself gradually under pressure. But we also talked about doing some of these things like breathing and pausing in your daily conversations where there's no pressure. Remember, you're priming the pump when you do that, so that when things do happen, your body's used to the pausing and the breathing. And then finally, or initially, right, we talked about why this happens. The sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight or stress response kicks in, and all of a sudden you feel like you've lost control, freeze up, can't think, breathing gets more shallow. So, what you want to do is use all the things I've talked about to activate the parasympathetic nervous system to calm you down and regain thoughts. All right, so let's get in here and answer some questions. What questions do you have? Specific situations, and Farouk and I will actually answer these questions for you. Uh, as you answer these questions, let me just go ahead and paste in a couple of things. So, one is those of you who are watching this, you may want to accelerate your progress. And it doesn't matter who you are, but all of us, we need support from time to time. I've spent tens, probably hundreds of $1,000 on coaching because I needed it. And you may need that also. You can try some things on your own, see how that works, but you may be at a stage in life where you want to accelerate your progress. You're tired of being limited, you're tired of feeling trapped, and you just want to take your speech, your career, your relationships, your finances to the next level. And so working with us accelerates that process. So if you click that link there, you're going to be able to work with me privately. You can set up an appointment, or you can just go ahead and enroll. Some of you have been watching me for a long time, and people will just go ahead and say, I'm ready to enroll. As a bonus, you're also going to get 6 months free to our virtual speech masters club. Okay. So we'll give you that. And that is the place where you can come every Saturday and practice under pressure. So Farouk, if you have time, go ahead and post a link to the Virtual Speech Masters Club, and you'll be able to get into that. So let's answer some questions. Someone said, I think breathing more slowly while speaking could be a challenge, but hopefully this will become easier with more practice. Breathing more, yes. It can be a challenge and probably will be a challenge initially, but you can absolutely do it. But you have to practice it when there's no pressure. That's why you have to do it in your daily conversations. Because if you try to do it under pressure, probably not going to work, right? Or it's going to be very, very difficult. So here's one from YouTube. Hi, can you guys have a webinar with Gene Jackson again? His breakdown of his speech training was very helpful. Of course we will. And hopefully you have been able to see the first one that we did. And we'll be sending those out because we've had a few of them just amazing. But we'll do another one with him as well. And thank you so much. I'm sure that if he's here, he'll be glad to hear that. If he's not here, then we'll make sure that he hears that. Any other questions? Any questions about anything that I've said? Questions about your own personal challenges or even statements that you may want to make about this? All right. Uh, Kellen, if you want to pop in here, you can actually do this verbally if you'd like to come in, turn on your video, or I can just read it. It's totally up to you. Let me know. So you're at work right now. Okay, all right. So just had coffee with a friend, and for some reason it wasn't anticipating, and it felt very confident. I was speaking very fluently and quickly. I never have felt that kind of freedom. It felt amazing, but the issue is I wasn't exactly modeling. So modeling is a tool to get you to your best speaking self. You're not always going to speak slowly. There are times where you're going to go fast because of the situation, because of the other people. And that's not always a bad thing. When you're initially getting into this and you're trying to change your speech, slowing down and modeling are the tools, are some of the tools that will help you get there. But as your identity starts to change and your speech pattern starts to change, you'll go back to more dynamic speech. Now, you want to monitor yourself Because if you see that you're speaking fast all the time and then you start stumbling and right, then you want to start to slow it down and be more dynamic. Now, what's dynamic? Dynamic is changing. It's a combination of fast and slow, which is actually how you hear me speaking now. I'm not speaking slow this whole entire time. Sometimes I'm actually speaking quite quickly, right? Quite rapidly. There's various reasons for that, but I'm in total control of my speech, but it's fast and slow. You hear me emphasizing. I'm always breathing. So just because you're speaking fast, but in final analysis, you felt free. You were flowing. You weren't thinking about your speech. And that is where we want you to get. So that's great. All right. So here we have one. I'll be getting married in a month, and I feel nervous about saying my vows in front of an audience. I felt that way too. Which tips can you give to help me eliminate my fears? I was working with someone who is in the same situation. So rehearsing, practicing, really all the things we talked about in terms of timing, right? So visualize, to spend a little bit of time. Again, it could be a minute visualizing each day, standing there. You visualize yourself breathing, smiling. You can visualize yourself feeling excited about it. Your heart is racing. You can visualize that because that's going to be real. Seeing yourself saying those vows, and then you can verbalize it. You can actually say the vows, and you can say, I said my vows, or I'm saying my vows very smoothly and confidently. Think of, okay, I'm saying my vows and I got stuck. What do I do? So figure out, what would I do if I got stuck on this? Where I would do this, where I would do that, where I would add this word. Think about that. Okay. So you visualize it. You do, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system on a daily basis, breathing exercise on a daily basis. Uh, and obviously, if you wanted to practice with someone, you could do that. But just remember, it's about the breathing, pausing, the taking your time, the affirmations of self talk. And in between that time, try to put yourself under pressure as much as you can. Put yourself under pressure. And then remind yourself you can take your time, right? You don't have to rush. It doesn't matter if it's marriage, vows, whatever. You can take your time, say what you want, what you need, when you want to. If you do those things, uh, you're going to, it's going to be a better chance that you'll do it smoothly than if you don't do those things. So every time you think about saying those vows, use that time to prepare. Just breathing, visualizing, rehearsing. Every time you think about it, substitute it with constructive action as opposed to worrying about it, being anxious about it. That's completely unhelpful. I tell people, even if you did these things that didn't work, it's not going to hurt you. But if you worry about it, you think about it negatively, you know that's going to hurt you. 100% it's going to hurt you. So do this and it didn't help. Okay, it didn't help, but I'm telling you it's going to help. Like, it will help. All right, so hopefully that is helpful. Okay, what else? Hopefully I answered that question. Another one. At a formation workshop, I used the speaking slow technique, articulated well, didn't feel nervous. I was using my body to emphasize certain points. I keep thanking you, Michael and Farouk. Affirmations kept me calm. These techniques are for real. So Edmund and Tiana joined our virtual speech masters club some time ago, and we've just seen tremendous improvements and changes in the club itself. But she's seeing it outside in real life. So definitely it's something that you want to check out, join our speech club because you can really see a lot of results there. Would you recommend starting slow in all speaking situations, low pressure and high pressure, as a way to keep priming the parasympathetic nervous system? Great question. Uh, yes. And it doesn't have to be super slow, but for example, some people, when they're speaking, they jump in and feel that the person is really finished. So that's an opportunity for you to pause and wait a little bit and then respond, right? So slowing down before you respond. So you want to say something, just pause for a second and then say what you want to say as opposed to just jumping in. And I've had clients who do that. Like I could barely finish before they were jumping in. Now they're pausing a little bit and they're waiting and they're slowing everything down. And it's helping their entire life, not just their speech. So, yes, I do recommend starting slow, pausing, and extending those first few words. Okay, extending those first few words. Any other questions? Any other questions? So, Farouk, if there's anything that you felt like, I'd really like to add this, just take 5 minutes. If there's anything that you feel like you want to add, to kind of enhance what we've talked about today, just take 5 minutes and jump in here because sometimes there's some things that from your perspective or things that you'll see that can enhance what we've talked about. If you don't, no problem. But if you do, I just wanted to give you a few minutes to do that. All right, we have another comment or question. My interview went bad. I really messed up. If I talk slowly, I can't frame sentences in pressure speaking situations. Okay, so some people feel like if they speak too slow, they're not able to maintain a flow. They're not able to really speak the way that they would like to. And this can happen to some people. So my question is, uh, what happens if you speak really fast? So someone says, well, I'm able to get it out. All right, but if you continue just speaking fast, then and you're able to get everything out, then you don't need any help, right? Because you're articulating and you're communicating your thoughts the way you want fast. The problem or the potential problem of speaking fast is that it comes from feeling rushed or it comes from feeling like if I slow down, I won't be able to say what I need to say. So I have to hurry up and get this out. And so sometimes people are not able to understand what you're saying because it's coming out so fast. You can build that stress response by going too fast. Breath can get short. You start to stumble over your words. So basically, what I'm saying is if speaking fast works for you and other people understand you clearly, then you don't need any help. You don't need to make any changes. If speaking fast is not working for you, but you're having a hard time speaking slow, it's simply because you probably haven't been practicing speaking slow in daily speaking situations, that is every day, until it becomes a habit. And remember, we're not saying we want you to speak slow the entire time. We're saying you start slow or even super slow, and then you move to more dynamic speech, right? Maybe on the slower side, but still dynamic. So you're changing your pacing. That just takes practice. It's not something that you can immediately do and just say, okay, I'm going to go slow in this interview. That's high pressure. It's probably not going to work. But if you start speaking slower, when you're speaking with your friends in your own language, whatever it is, then you'll find, oh, hey, this does feel great. I can just, then you increase the pressure in which you speak slow, like in your meetings or when you're speaking to people in authority. Then you'll find, oh, I can do this. It's a new skill, it's a new habit. So that would be my response to that. Yes, sir, Farouk.
Hey Michael, are you able to see me?
Yes, I can see and hear
All
you
right, so
fine.
I was not actually very much prepared for it. I'm on my bed right now, but I'll still just head it. Yeah, so it was a really, really, really wonderful webinar. I got to learn a lot of stuff. I enjoyed it a lot. So probably just a point or two that I would like to add that I've heard many people say is that many people just articulate the fact that I'm a very fast speaker. So we would often hear people saying that I'm a very fast speaker, slowing down speech is really hard. It's hard for me. I can't really do that. I always speak fast. I'm always anxious. So it's fine when our clients are saying these things to ourselves. But what happens is that what you say to yourself has a huge impact on you. So if you have built up a belief around the fact that you are a fast speaker and that you always speak fast, then more than likely that would happen more and more. So you need to start to add this affirmation to your box that I'm a slow speaker, or speaking slow is really easy for me. It's really easy for me to slow down my speech. Because if you keep saying that's hard, I can't do that, I'm a very fast speaker, then those things would have an impact on you. At the start, when you say that you're a very slow speaker, that you're always relaxed, whatever the speaking situation is, at the start, your mind might say, no, you're not a relaxed person. You're not a slow speaker, but the more you keep saying these things to yourself, the more and more you start to believe that. And obviously, you're not just saying these things to yourself, you're also practicing, you're also doing all the work. It's really important what you say to yourself. So, self talk while you're speaking, before you're speaking, it's very important. And also these affirmations. An affirmation is a self talk, but it's just a set phrase. So, make sure that you let yourself know that you're a very relaxed person and that it's easy to slow down your speech actually. So, and sometimes I found that just not all the times, but sometimes softening your voice a bit can also help you. And I'm not saying that soften your voice in a way that the next person can't hear you, but from working with many clients, I found out that some of them, not all of them, some of them speak really, really loud. So they feel like they have to speak really loud. Once you soften your voice, it also makes you feel a bit relaxed, a bit easy, but obviously it has to be loud enough so the people can hear it. But just check that you're not speaking very loud. Because if you soften your voice, that would also help you relax down. Like I can speak like this as well right here, but I don't need to. And that might make me a bit more anxious when I'm in a pressure speaking situation. Just softening it up a bit. So, and I really like the point. I had it for the first time, like you talked about create and facilitate. So there was one more create,
Create, initiate, and
initiate.
facilitate.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So that's really interesting. And in fact, just like Michael said, I've also moved, and right here I'm having to meet new people at the university right here, and it's not easy. And obviously, in fact, even myself, I sometimes do feel a bit of hesitation, not in terms of speech, but just that I don't know them, they don't know me, and I have to go up to them and speak to them, but it's just at the start. If you can find a way to just initiate the conversation, then it gets going. So if you can find a way to just create and initiate, and like Michael said, just starting off super slow, you would find that after a while you would start to be more comfortable with them, they would start to be more comfortable with you. And obviously you're speaking slow, you're speaking smooth, so that would also be really easy for you. So there's being proactive is very important. So don't just sit back and wait for speaking opportunities. While I was working on my speech, I used to make phone calls to my friends, and some of them used to think that I'm making phone calls to speak with them, but it was actually to practice my speech. So I was like, let me make a phone call to them and let me practice slowing down. Yeah, so I wanted to ask you whether we would, so I would just extend and do everything that I wanted to while I was on a call. So go out to marts, go out to supermarkets, speak to people. And the more you use your new speaking style when you are actually proactive, the easier would it be for you to use it when you're not proactive, like when someone comes up to you and when they are speaking to you. So yeah, Michael, just probably this. It was a
Thank you.
wonderful webinar. I enjoyed it a lot.
That's actually a great point. The more you use it when you're proactive, and I'll just use this word, the more you'll be able to use it when you have to be reactive, right? When you need to respond. Great point. Great point. Okay. If there are no other questions, yes, sir. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think someone just asked about something that we could go ahead and answer. So they said that what if I have issues saying certain nouns and names?
Yeah. That's a very, very common challenge that people have certain letters, sounds, just initiating, getting those things out. I want to answer it briefly, but also I'm going to do it accurately. There's things that you need to do long term, and actually, you just mentioned this. So, the more proactive you are, that is, the more situations that you create, you initiate, you facilitate, and you practice saying those names and those sounds in no to low pressure, right? So you're doing this kind of on a long-term basis. The more likely you'll be able to do it in the short term, in the moment, in higher pressure speaking situations. If you just try to use techniques and tools, they're not going to always work. No matter how great they are, they'll work a lot, they'll work sometimes, they even work, might even work, some of them might work most of the time. But there's the long-term thing that you have to do. All the things that are in our system. It's a whole system. So sometimes it's not even about a technique. There are some days where you can say a word in a letter because you feel confident, and another day you can't say that same word because you don't feel confident. Or you might feel fine in both speaking situations. One day it just doesn't come out. How do you respond to that? That makes a difference too. Do you ruminate about it? Do you think about it, which makes it worse? Or do you look at it like a bump in the road? So it's about what you do long term, our system, the system, right? And also, there are some tools and things that you can do in terms of airflow linking, making sure that you kind of sandwich that word between something else, that you start with a sound, that you start with another word so that you can say that word. Those are techniques, and they're pretty solid techniques that work, but you can't just depend on those. You also have to do the long-term work so that you actually stop thinking about, even though there might be times where you didn't think about that word, it's just, bam, I just can't say it. But as you change your identity and you change your speech pattern, you'll all of a sudden find that you're saying those words without thinking about it. So it's long term and short term. You got to work both. All right. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you. If you have other questions, you can go ahead and leave it. If you're on YouTube, you can go ahead and post the questions in there. I believe that we retain that chat so that I can go back and see what comments and questions you've made. And then uh, we will find a way, or we'll do a follow-up and try to answer those. But I want to strongly encourage you to join our virtual speech masters. For those of you who are ready and you're professional, and you want to work with me to accelerate your progress, I've seen people accelerate their progress by at least 10 times, meaning it can take a person years to get to a certain place where it can take them months working with us. All right. Thank you so much. We'll get the recording out as soon as we can, and then we'll have an edited version a little later. And I'm going to create a series where I go into a little bit more detail and break this out probably into 3 separate videos. Okay. We'll see you all the next time. And
All
thank
right.
you
See
for,
everybody. Bye.
okay, bye.
Thank you.